Y'all know what it is.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Eggs. This week we have Jack Bosch. Jack is known as the land guy. He is a real estate investor, educator, husband, and father, originally an immigrant from Germany who came over with just 2 suitcases and a bunch of student debt. Jack, along with his wife Michelle, have found their niche in real estate. Since 2002, they've been buying and selling lots and unimproved land and have flipped more than 4,000 transactions. It only took them 18 months to go from zero to $1 million, and since 2008, they've been educating those who either find houses too challenging or are unsatisfied with the competition and teaching them how to make more money from simple land and lot flips. They've also figured out a way to land cash flow massively and consistently with checks coming in for years and even decades. All of that sounds like a lot of fun stuff to unpack, and I'm super interested in doing so. So without any further ado, welcome our guest, Jack Bosch.
Hey, well, thank you for having me.
Of course. Thanks, Jack. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, not a problem. Sorry about the scheduling mishap beforehand, but we're all here, so we're good.
We're good. Yes. Yeah. No, I mean, for the listeners who don't understand how important this is, I mean, Jack was originally not able to do the show because of some technical problems and things like that, but now he's been able to overcome them by way of cell phone connections and some real MacGyvering. So we're super grateful that he took the time and energy to figure it all out so he can be here.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Thank you. No, my internet went out, but we figured out a way to make it work. So
that's great. Well, cool. So Jack, let's just kind of get started at the beginning. Let's talk a little bit about who you are, where you come from, and how we got to where we are today.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm originally, as you mentioned in the intro, I'm originally from Germany, as you can probably also tell from my accent right away. Plus, I just spent a few days in Germany, so I probably have a stronger accent than I usually have. And I came over here a bunch of years ago to basically finish my college degree and had no plans to stay in the country, had never been to the U.S. before, and got here and really enjoyed it here, fell in love with the country. Also, coincidentally, fell in love, as it often happens, with a girl. And long story short, that girl is now my wife of going on 19 years. And we have a 12-year-old daughter, happily married. So that worked out. And so we decided to stay here in the country. My wife is not from here either. She's from Central America, from Honduras. So we both needed a work visa. So we got jobs and we got a work visa. And over a course of 5.5 years, long story short, we got to the green card. But those were some tough 5.5 years. And in that process of the 5.5 years of working sometimes 60 to 80 hours a week, traveling 100%, going through waves of layoffs where I was really seriously concerned about losing my job because the company that I worked for, they let go 40% of their people, which in that case was 3,000 people in a matter of a year. I came to the conclusion more and more that I needed to do something on my own. And after a lot of search, we came across real estate, and within real estate to the very little known concept of land flipping instead of house flipping. So
interesting. What were you doing for your first job here just to get your work visa? Was it anything with real estate, or was it just?
No, it was a technology firm, a software firm, and it was one of their implementation consultants, more like a business analyst. I'm not a software guy. I don't know how to fix my computer. The number one fix I always have for every computer is turn it off and turn it back on. And so I worked more in a business analyst as a business analyst there, and nothing to do with real estate, and and nothing to do with real estate historically in my family and my German background either. So it was a completely new area, and which brought its challenges because not only is it brand new, but you actually have to learn the terminology. Like coming from another country, you're first learning English, and I knew English from high school, but enough to get into college, but now you learn business English, then you learn street English, or first street English, then you learn, let's say, business or software English, and all of a sudden I have to learn what a 2x4 is, and what drywall is, and what a deed is, and what you name it, what all these different things around real estate. It was just a complete new world and took a while to learn too.
So what kind of got your interest going with real estate? Was it Rich Dad Poor Dad, or what? I mean, like usually that's kind of the book that gets people into that world.
It was, but in this case, it was actually interestingly that my wife then, after also working for a while, and I think she working for a while with a visa, she went back to school to get a master's, and she went to a school in Phoenix, Arizona called Thunderbird, close by to where we live, in the same town, and it happened that Robert Kiyosaki back then had just written Rich Dad Poor Dad, and it wasn't known at all yet, and he had hired a few of these graduate college students to actually create a marketing plan for him. And one night we were at dinner at one of these guys' place because they were like in study groups and things together. So he's like a little dinner party over at his house. And then we talk and stuff. And I tell him how frustrated I am in my job and everything. He's like, dude, read this. So he gives me probably one of the first 1,000 copies printed of Rich Dad Poor Dad because nobody knew the book yet. And I go read it. And I just like, I read through this book in like 36 hours. And then, yes, so it's definitely responsible for changing my mind there.
Yeah, I actually had a real similar kind of story. I had a roommate that followed Robert Kiyosaki's principles and had the game, the rat race and all that stuff. And I played it a few times and I never actually pulled the trigger and did anything on my own. I just kind of, I figured out the concept and kind of, oh, that's cool, but I never did anything with it. So props on you for actually following through.
Well, yeah, and maybe this is a great segue into that discussion about how do you actually get started in real estate? Like, I mean, Mike's just mentioning he hasn't actually gotten into it, but I know he's been looking at land and some other things recently. I've been doing sort of the same, but like, how do I know I can trust my real estate agent? Like, I'm just picking, some random guy who does real estate investment. Like, how do I know he's a good guy? How do you get into this thing?
And then
right.
Why would you focus on land versus homes? Why did you pick the raw land?
So that's probably the answering both questions in one. I can do that with a great combination of questions. So we first started looking at real estate when we literally watched an infomercial at night, and then also when we read the book. But even the book Rich Dad Poor Dad is not only about real estate. It talks about real estate, but it talks about other ways, just passive income and so on. So we looked around and we liked the profit potential of real estate, but of course we didn't come across land because nobody at that time talked about land. Still today, we're one of the only ones that, and the largest one talking about land and teaching this. But what we did is we just started studying real estate. So I got myself a book, and I'm looking at my bookshelf. It's right there. The book of like the 101 of real estate or real estate dictionary, about the dictionary, because I need to know the terms first of all. Like, what does all this stuff mean? Because my additional hurdle was the language, right? And then I read some basic thing. I read some basic books, went to Barnes and Nobles and just sat there on a Saturday, Sunday afternoon, and just we both read up on stuff to even understand what are concepts out there. And the first concept we learned was the wholesaling concept. So we went out and then you can go actually drive around neighborhoods and you'll find some of these boarded up houses. And it's like, what the heck is that? I've never even paid attention to that. My eye was not trained for anything like that. So we took the car and we drove around the neighborhoods and we found boarded up houses. And we're like, oh my God, this is really work. So then it becomes a trust thing. It's like, okay, they say this is what you're going to find and you actually find it. Okay, great. So let me now take the next step. Because at the very beginning, a lot of people give up if people tell them like, this is going to happen. And then if it doesn't happen, they give up. Because it's like, okay, it's like right from the beginning, it's not true. So they move on to something else. So in our case, we find those. So we go on a free day. I think one day worked only until Thursday, had Friday off. We will go down to the county and we research who owns these places, where do they live? And we send them a letter saying like, hey, we just drove by your boarded up house. Are you interested in selling? And one guy contacted us back and he was willing to sell a property for $45,000, and it was a triplex. So we marked it up for $5,000 because we thought it was worth like 80 or 90, and 28 people looked at it and not a single one bought it. We're like, what happened now? Why didn't they buy it? They didn't tell us. Now I know the reason they didn't buy it is because we estimated every single repair in this thing wrong. Because we didn't know, again, zero experience. We didn't know what it costs to rehab a kitchen or a bathroom or replace a roof or upgrade electric or do foundation issues or remedy mold or any of this stuff. And this house pretty much had all of it. So we were kind of freaked out and backed out of the deal, but we had seen enough that then that's probably more an mental attitude kind of thing. Instead of saying it doesn't work, what we saw is, oh my God, there is people willing to give you properties cheap. There's properties out there. We just need to do a better job and we'll find them. And then so it's like, okay, so this kind of like this attitude is like, there's a possibility, we just haven't gotten the right angle. So then we step back, and then the next thing, but the same stuff, we didn't have the money to buy it. We wouldn't have had the money or experience to rehab it. So we stepped back from the deal and says like, okay, real estate works apparently, but this wasn't the right way for us. So we started looking around. We again remembered Rich Dad Poor Dad. Somewhere 2/3 of the deal in the book, he talks to his neighbor about buying tax liens and getting 16% interest. And I was like, what are tax liens? So we started studying that. And so how do you get started is like, you study different methods until you find the method that really fits with both your level of knowledge at the time, your level of capability at the time, and your level of confidence at the time. And all our level of capability was low, our level of confidence was low, and our level of capabilities was non-existent, or also very low. So we needed to find something that was not complicated, didn't require a lot of money, and that we could still do something with. So we looked at these tax delinquent properties like tax liens, tax deeds, and tried that and failed again. Attended auctions, everything was outbid, bought some liens, they were redeemed 3 weeks later, we made $3.72 in interest. It just didn't make sense. But then it occurred to us that if somebody out there already stopped paying property taxes, they obviously, for some reason or the other, doesn't want their property anymore. So how about we combine what we learned earlier that we can find them and send them a letter. And then, since the data was already there, we basically sent them a letter, and all of a sudden we get a whole bunch of answers back, but every single answer was just land. Everyone that answered just had a piece of land. We're like, what do we do now? And we ended up making a really low ball offer because the guy just basically said he doesn't want it anymore. He wants to move away. He wants to not leave anything behind here. And we got our first piece of land for $400 and sold it to the neighbor the next day for $4,000. And we're like, okay, now that we can do again. Because we didn't need to know how to repair it. We didn't need to know how to estimate any repairs. We didn't need to have to buy it. We had $400. We didn't need to spend or take on a credit or a line of credit or a mortgage or so. We didn't need to fix anything. And we could literally, untouched, sell that thing to somebody else right away again. And since then, the next deal happened shortly afterwards. And then we just put the blinders on. It's just like, this works. We don't have to know everything about real estate. We just put the pedal to the metal, put the blinders on, and now we have done 4,000 deals.
Yeah, no, I think that's amazing. I mean, and I especially like that you sort of shared the story or the version of it that begins with no money, because I think so many people that want to get into real estate, they recognize that there's good profit potential there. They recognize that it could be a great source of passive income, but it's really hard to get into. If you've got to go take a mortgage on every one of these properties or whatever, which you might if you were buying houses and things like that, then it sure could be really tough to get started. And so I think a lot of people sort of quit before they begin. So right. I think that's a great story.
And to add to it, in the housing world right now, there's deals to be had. I know guys that do 300 house deals a year, but the beginning investor who doesn't have the marketing savvy and doesn't have the experience, they often have a hard time finding even that first deal, because there's a lot of people looking for house deals and there's almost nobody looking for land deals.
So what's your marketing techniques? I mean, do you just put the flyers up on the side of the road, say we buy ugly houses? I think that's branded. So
right, that is branded. No, we do direct mail. We get a list from a list service or from the county, and we actually we're way beyond the tax delinquent properties by now. We used to start when I said, but this is how we found it, that we realized that people don't pay their property taxes, which was, that concept alone was mind blowing to us. Why in the world would somebody not want their property anymore? Why are they not putting it on the market themselves? Why are they not calling a realtor and selling it? Why they're not giving it up, just putting a sign on there saying like, here, for sale for cheap or so? And but the answer is they just don't. They haven't, they don't, they won't. They're just often live 1,000 miles away, 500 miles away, 2,000 miles away. They often don't care. They often passed away. The heirs now have it. They don't want to do it. So bottom line, they just don't care about it. But since it's land, you can't put a sign on it because the owner's never going to read it. So on houses, that works. You can put a sign up there. You can put postcards in the mailboxes and so on. But with land, it doesn't work. You got to find where the owners work. But what we found is that after doing like a couple of hundred tax delinquent deals or deals that we initially we contacted because of tax delinquency, we realized that really 80% of those deals had paid off their taxes already. So we don't actually only have to focus on the people that owe back taxes. We can focus on everyone that owns land, and typically it's land between $5,000 and $100,000. And what we do is we go get a list from the county or from our list service that includes their mailing address, and we send them a simple but very well-designed letter.
Okay. So what kind of properties are you focusing on mainly? Are you looking for land that's just raw land? Or are you looking for stuff with septic and sewer and water and all that already in? Are you focusing on like a certain type of property that you can flip quickly? Is there one that's better than the other?
Yeah, that was sort of my question too, because I think that, I mean, as a total outsider, as a total novice to this, it seems like with property, you might buy a piece of property, but maybe then it couldn't be built on, or then, like there's considerations to be involved in land.
So sure, absolutely. So typically the information on whether or not a property is buildable or not has already been built into its value. So into its market value. And typically if one property can't be buildable, the one next door can't be buildable, and it's all the ones on the street for whatever reason. So either whether it's swampland, that's God forbid, but or whether it's just that there's building restrictions or something like that. So what we do is we focus on three kinds of properties. And then within those properties, we find out which are the problem properties very quickly. So the three properties are, number one, infill lots. So we like to be in the city where there's, let's think, a street with 35 houses, one empty lot. If those 35 houses are worth 300 grand a piece, let's say on average, then the house is worth the lot is worth about 25% of that. So you have a $75,000 lot. Those lots we pick up for about 25-30% of market value, and then we go flip them to a builder, and the builder goes straight in, builds a spec home or builds a house and goes sells it. The second kind of property we like to focus on is the properties in the outskirts of bigger cities, what also called the path of growth. So typically the city ends, and if the city's growing, the city keeps adding like a quarter mile, half a mile to it every year. So if you're like 5 miles out, 10 miles out or so, it's a great opportunity for either financial investors to buy that basically want to hold on for appreciation down the road, or for people that just want to have a little more space, they will live or want to have a little bit more space to live in, but not be totally out in the rural areas. So they live 10 miles out on 2-3 acres, have like some I don't know, goats or horses or something like that, and have space out there. But then they drive into town, and it's only a 20-minute drive to town, and that's where they work. It's the same as working somewhere in the suburbs and commuting to downtown. Often that takes longer than commuting from 20 minutes outside of town into the outskirts of town. And the third kind of property we focus on is recreational property. That's really just raw land. That's just 10, 20, 40 acres, 80 acres in the rural areas, about 1 to 3 hours drive from the city. The buyer for that is typically the outdoorsy kind of hiker, camper, hunter, dirt biker kind of guy that wants to go and take the weekend and horse around on his own piece of land out in the more rural areas.
So on that type of property, just the raw land in rural areas, are you pretty much carrying the loan for them, doing owner financing?
That is a great question, and we indeed are. As a matter of fact, when you're in the introduction set that we figured out how to create cash flow from land, that's exactly how we create cash flow from land. We sell these properties either cash, and usually go right back to our first deal that we couldn't do, where we freaked out and where nobody would buy it. We wholesale the land. So typically those properties in the outskirts of town and the rural areas, we buy anywhere from 5 to 25 cents on the dollar. The infill lots, we go a little higher because they're But you can flip it the next day to a builder. But our bread and butter, 90% of our deals are in the outskirts of town in the rural areas. Those we buy for 5 to 25 cents on a dollar. So let's say a $30,000 piece of land, we literally buy that thing for $4,000, or put it on a contract for $4,000 and then sell it to somebody for like $17,000, making us a $12,000 profit. Or we take a $50,000 profit, put it on a contract for 10, sell it for 30, and make a 20 grand profit. So that's a wholesaling deal, and that's cash. But a lot of buyers love buying with seller financing. They don't have 50 grand, but they do have 10 to do a 20% down payment. So if you put it on a contract for 10 and you sell it to somebody with $10,000 down payment, you're break even right from the moment that you sell the property on. Now they make $500 payments for the next 10 years, paid off with a 10 or 12% interest rate, which is normal in land. You're good. You're done. You have this beautiful cash flow coming in of $500 a month, which is the equivalent of the cash flow you get on a regular kind of house. But you have no tenants, no toilets, no termites, no repairs, no midnight move-outs, none of the stuff that you have, none of the hassles that you deal with houses.
How long are you usually sitting on a property before you can find someone to buy it? And then if you're carrying you say you're carrying a term for like $5,000 and then or 10 grand, and then your down payment usually covers the cost of that. How are you kind of holding that in reserve until, because I doubt you're just putting 10 grand down and buying it. Are you putting it on contract?
Right. So two different questions. So the first one is, sorry, I forgot the first one. What was the first one?
I'm just wondering about the process, like from start to finish, how long you usually sit on the property.
Oh, how long you're sitting on the property. So you sit on the property anywhere from a day to typically to a maximum, let's say a couple months. If the property's priced right, it has the right terms, and if it's not, I mean, are there areas where property is worth less and where there's junk, where nobody buys properties? Absolutely. Right? Of course, there exist. But the very first step that we teach our students when they start with us is how to find the areas and how to focus on the areas where properties sell quickly. So assuming that you did that step and you focus on areas that where properties sell quickly, like in growing areas and so on and so forth, where there's actually people moving towards, and then the answer is, if you got your listing right and you put it in the right places, then you can sell. You can reasonably expect that property to sell in a matter of like 1 to 6 weeks. So having said that, when we put them on a contract, we typically get a contract with a close of escrow date of 6 months out. So we do the opposite of the house flippers. We don't go to people and say, like, we buy your land in 7 days. They don't care. Nobody else is going to make them an offer because there's very few people in this market buying properties yet. There's a lot of people looking for properties, but they don't go directly to the owners. So when we send somebody a letter, chances are this is the first letter they've gotten in 10 years. So we don't have to rush. We don't have to take that property and close it and buy it in like the next 7 days. We literally tell them close of escrow is up to 6 months from now. And they're like, okay, it's cool. Nobody else bought this property in 10 years. They can hold it for another half a year. So then we put it on the market, and our contract allows us to market the property while we have it on a contract. Very important line item there. So then we have it on a contract. We haven't put out any money yet. We market it. We find the buyer, and then we can do either an assignment, assign our contract over to the buyer, or do what's called the double closing, either with the buyer bringing up all the money and paying everyone, or if really necessary, with transactional funding in the middle, depending on their amount and depending on the title company and the state you do it in. But bottom line is, we can do these deals, and you can do these deals without actually bringing any money to the table.
That's crazy.
Yeah, no, that really is amazing. So maybe let's talk a little bit more about that. So one of the, I guess, central ideas that you guys have is this idea of sort of forever cash, this idea that you've got a steady cash flow. I guess, I'm not sure whether you would consider it passive or not, but you've got built this cash flow plan. What are the sort of central tenets or your thoughts about that? Like, how do we go about building a forever cash financial?
Yeah, so we even wrote a book about that called Forever Cash that has that title. So ultimately, land flipping is the most wonderful tool in the world. I'll probably do it forever. But land flipping provides what we call one-time cash. So basically, in any flip, and house flips too, like a wholesale deal, any kind of flip, even a job, provides what's called one-time cash. So we talk about 3 kinds of cash, and this is not like a dictionary kind of term. This is what my wife and I came up in our own family terminology. So there's such things. There's activities that create cash once. These are called one-time cash activities. There's activities that create cash for a long time, but not forever. These are called temporary cash activities. And there's activities or investments that provide cash forever. The ultimate goal, in order to be generationally financially free, is to generate forever cash assets. The problem with forever cash assets is they usually cost money. So you got to first create the money in order to invest in them. So therefore what we have created is a plan, is a philosophy and a plan that we have implemented in our life that has led to us living in a beautiful custom home, that led to us being traveling 3 months of every year. And because we focused on this kind of rolling thing. So we started out flipping land just for cash in order to get out of debt and to build up some cash balances. Then we started selling land with seller financing for 5, 7, 10-year financial stability. And then we started taking all the excess cash that we needed once we quit our jobs and once we paid our regular expenses, all the excess cash, and put it on the sideline, and then regularly and then more and more regularly started reinvesting that into forever cash assets, which in my world, typically what I like to invest in is large apartment complexes or single family rentals. So I have nothing against houses. It's just to make money, cash with houses is one of the harder things in life compared to making cash with land. So we use our land flipping as our cash machine to drive up profits and cash flow. And then we use the cash flow to actually then turn that into long generational assets. Like this year, in the last 24 months, we bought 3 large apartment complexes with 90 to 150 units. And this year we're planning to buy another one. And we just hold that thing then forever. That's going to be paid off and bring in $1 million a year in cash flow, or $500,000, whatever the number might be on that deal. But how did we come up with the cash for the down payment, for like a $2 million down payment for a $6 million apartment complex? We do that with a land flipping. Land flipping provides the method to get you out of the rat race and get you, like Kiyosaki would say, get you out of the rat race. The passive income allows you to quit your job and do nothing for a couple of years for a while. But then ultimately, we roll that back over into the third thing. So now what we do is we do land flipping and land education. But then we take the assets that money generated and put it into another additional asset class that we keep forever.
Interesting. So apartments are the way to go for the forever money, and then the temporary money is the flipping the land.
Yes, we like apartments for that because then also we syndicate it with investors, so we allow investors to come in with us, alongside with us to get passive cash flow on that too. But we like apartments because when you go for large apartment complexes, which is about 3.2 million times more complicated than land flipping, but when you go for the large apartment complexes, you have actually a management team in place on site. Versus if you have houses, even if you have a property manager, for every little thing over $500, they call you. So you still have to constantly make decisions and make authorizations or look for contractors and things like that. Versus in the large apartment complexes, you don't, because you have a team on hand that actually does all of that for you, and you still make a return on it at the end of the day. So,
okay.
So we did some houses, and then we're like, we have over 40 or almost 50 houses. We're like, screw that. They're fine. We keep them. But the way to really be passive is on the bigger side. So we make our money in land. Land is our first love, will always be. It's just so much simpler than any other real estate investing technique, and yet it provides the same profits and better cash flow than most others.
Yeah, no, I think that helps clear up. I was having a question. I was wondering about, you go and buy all these big apartment buildings, but that seems like a bunch of work. Like, now all of a sudden you've got to, oversee these operations or whatever. But I guess so the solution is when you're vetting a property or whatever, you make sure they've got a great management team already in place.
We have
they do.
Yeah, we have a property in North Carolina that I'm getting a weekly email. And the weekly email states, gives me all the data. And right now, I got the email on Monday, and it basically says we're at 98.7% occupied. We had to file 3 evictions, but they all promised to pay. An air condition went down. We were able to fix it, and we hired a new maintenance guy. And it's like, okay, thank you. I don't even have to do a phone call with them unless I have a specific question. So I read an email, and that's been like that all the time. So this property has been occupied at almost 100% for the last 9 months. And before we were ramping it up. So yes, there's a little bit work, but now this property, I don't have to worry about, assuming everything continues like it is, which why shouldn't it? I don't really have to worry about for the next 20 years because we keep a little bit money automatically off to the side. So it's budget for repairs, but they do everything. I fly out there twice a year and go check it out. Other than that, it just runs itself really with the right property management company. Obviously, if you hire the wrong one, they can run it to the ground. But if you have the right one, it's about as hands off as I've ever have seen anything.
Well, and in the situation like that where you've got to bring on a property manager, do you have like a firm that you use that manages all your properties, or do you use somebody out there local? Like, I guess I'm trying to figure out how much management is there. I mean, if you're living in Arizona and you've got to get this place.
So I mean, we're talking about a $7 million asset. So we're talking about a $7 million asset. There is a little bit of, first of all, on top of it, there's investors, friends and family, people, followers of us that follow us, that learn from us, invested with us. So I have a responsibility to make sure that asset is being managed properly. Now, over time, as we're able more and more to buy these things without investors, it's just us and our money's on the line. But if somebody else's money is on the line, I'll be paying extra attention to that. But the thing is, there's a process involved in vetting a property manager and making sure that they're the right one for the property. And then there's a process in communicating with them and making sure that you set up the budgets for the year. So you still have to manage a manager, but once things are running, it's like they're running. So in between, it's like perhaps a phone call or two a week, and perhaps a few hours here and there that you look at, prepare your budget, because they're executing your vision for the property, right? And our vision for the property is to make it the best Class C property in its neighborhood, like the best, most beautiful Class C, almost like B minus or C plus, B minus property in the neighborhood. But basically a beautiful property. So we spent $250,000 putting a new roof on the property. Now we had raised that money beforehand. So it was there sitting in account already, but then they looked at and found like 4 different quotes, and we then picked the quote for them. So you have to do little things like picking a quote and making sure that the quotes are right and making sure that the sequence of improvements are done. But you just tell them, hey, these are the 7 improvements we want to do. Here's the budget for each, and then sequence them out. And then you have like monthly calls or weekly calls that you do that. But it's not that much. Once that is set, you go out there. Now, having said that, the acquisition process is a bear. The acquisition process is a bear, but look at it. I've been doing this for 17 years now, real estate investing. And if somebody would have given me an apartment complex deal to do 17 years ago, I would have been running the other way, screaming. Because I didn't have the knowledge, the capability, the confidence, I had no idea what I was doing. So now we fast forward 14, 15 years. I have done 36 by that time or so, 100 deals, now 4,000 deals. I'm teaching this. I have a portfolio of rental houses in different markets. I've made all the mistakes that you can make with property managers already. I have learned a lot of the things already. I am now ready to implement my next step of Forever Cash, which is literally 7 figures a year coming in passively for the rest of my life and my daughter's life. And for that, I'm willing to take on a bear of a new project because I now have the experience and the knowledge and capability to do it. As a beginning investor, I would not recommend that. As a beginning investor, I would recommend focus on what's simple. And to my opinion, there's nothing simpler than land flipping.
So let's go back over the 17-year career that you have. Is there one piece of advice or one experience that kind of stands out to you that is like, don't do this, don't make this mistake? Because I'm sure there's a few of them, but is there one that you would like point out to that, like this screwed me over, I don't want to go down this road, if you can avoid this, don't do it?
The thing that I realize now, especially since we're also teaching it, is that a lot of students, and I was in the same boat, I didn't recognize the value of bringing somebody with you or bringing somebody on that has done it before. So the very first time, obviously in that time, there was nobody teaching land flipping, but it took us 3 years to figure out land flipping, because in year one is when that wholesale deal happened that went bad. But then we spent another 2 years and 9 months failing forward and failing and different kind of stuff in tax liens and other things, and trying stuff and giving up again and not doing anything for 3 months and then trying again. And then within 18 months after figuring out our method, we're millionaires. The same thing when we started the apartment complex stuff. Now we learned. So now every time we do something new, we go look for the very best person out there that we can find to do this. Because while we didn't lose money per se, we lost time. If we would have been able to figure all of this out much faster, we would have been successful even much faster, would have quit our jobs much faster, and would have literally had a multiple 7-figure impact on our lives more. I'm not complaining. We're doing really well. But that's probably the number one thing that I see people doing. They kind of disregard the experience of others and the ability to learn from others, and just trying to do it on your own. I just was in Germany doing our very first ever German training where we taught Germans how to do this deal in the United States, because land flipping can be done completely virtual. We haven't seen any property for like the 12 years. And a lot of the Germans are like, I'm just going to try this myself. And it's like, okay, I mean, at least you have got a course, but there's going to be specific hurdles from Germany that you don't have in the US. So they're like, yeah, don't worry, I still got to do it. I'm just going to do it. I was like, okay, so I'm expecting a lot of them to have issues because just that's how it is. So that's my experience. That's probably the number one thing. And what we've learned from that is now every time we do something for the first apartment complex, we look for somebody who already owns 600 units, that already knows what you're doing, and that allowed us to partner up with them. It cost us $80,000 to be able to do that, but we're able to do it, and from that learn so much that we otherwise would have lost our shirt probably on the first deal.
Yeah, that makes sense. Someone who's been down the road before usually can answer questions that you don't know.
Yeah, and protect you from mistakes and bring you even, like, it's both. It's defense and offense. They help you avoid mistakes, and they help you move forward quicker.
So
yeah, no, I think that's great advice.
You obviously teach a class, and you teach people how to do this. Is that kind of, you're doing this now as kind of like a way to pass it forward, or is this a side business that you have?
Well, both. I mean, it is obviously there's a cost involved for people to do this, and there's, at the end of the day, do we make some profit on it? Yes, but if I would spend all my time just flipping land, then I would probably make twice as much in the land flipping than what we make in the house flipping. So it's and the educational side. So it's not something that we're doing for the profit. It is indeed. It's something that once we reached our own financial success, we started looking beyond our own kind of plate and seeing like what else is there. And it actually happened that we reached our financial goals right when the market shifted in 2007, 2008. And we just bought our dream home. We just bought our first big cars. We traveled. We had a bunch of money in a bank account. And while everyone around us was losing their shirts, and our technique kept working. So the market was crashing like this, and we would just buy cheaper and sell cheaper. Like, our margins were smaller, so instead of buying something for 10 and selling it for 30, we would buy it for 4 and selling it for 18, and still make 14,000, not 20 anymore, but 14. And so our margins were smaller, but it kept working. And left and right of us, people were going bankrupt and losing everything. And that's when we realized we really need to share this. And out of that came then the mission statement that we're literally looking to create 1,000 millionaires out there in order to change 1,000 people's families' lives at $1 million plus level. What that does to their kids and their grandkids, it's something we can't even imagine. And plus, even the people who don't hit the $1 million, they'll perhaps hit the $200,000, $300,000 thing. It still changes their lives. So yes, it's definitely something to pay forward, because we have built up our financial life to the point that we don't really need to work anymore.
Yeah, I think that's great. Hey, so as we're starting to get kind of to the end of this show, I wondered if maybe you could, I don't know, give us a little bit of a sneak peek, or like, let's say that you've got a student or somebody, I don't know, even me or Mike here, and we decided, you know what, we're so inspired by this conversation that now we want to get into this stuff. Like, what would be the first step that you would do? Now, obviously, your first step as a young person doing it the first time, probably isn't the same first step you'd take today. But what would be your sort of first thing of advice? I mean, is it just, reach out and find mentors, or what would be the first thing you would do if you're going to instruct us to get started in land?
We do have a course for that, obviously, but you can find that at landprofitfund.com. But anyway, the thing is, in order to, let's assume somebody wants to get started and already has that, the first thing we teach somebody is that you first got to focus on where you want to do this in the country. And really, the entire country is your playground, because you don't have to go look at these properties yourself. So the first step is where you want to be. You want to be in the outskirts of town, you want to be in the city, you want to be in rural areas. And then where you want to be. So we tell people how to find some areas. And what we like to tell people is like, go on Google and search for the 100 fastest growing cities in the United States. And then pick one. Not everyone pick number 1, pick number 12 and 15 and 27 and so on, because they're all fast growing. And then go and then identify some counties around it. So like ideally the counties, there's just like 1 or 2 counties out from those metropolitan areas are counties where we do a lot of business in, because they're far enough out that properties are cheap, and they're close enough that they're really attractive for people that want to just live 20 minutes out. Also, the county itself with the infill lots is interesting. And then thirdly, if you want to do in the rural areas, go look out what's out there. If you go like a circle and you're like, what's out, like 2 hours driving distance, is there anything out there? Let's take Atlanta, Georgia. Atlanta, Georgia is always one of the fastest growing cities in the U.S. There's some counties around there that are growing that you can go to. And an hour north are the Smoky Mountains. Awesome. You got yourself an area that works really well because it has all those pieces. The next step is then you go get a list from the county with those properties, you filter it down, and then you send out your letters. Now, for all of that stuff, all the details of that, they are indeed in a course. But for somebody to start out, it's the first thing, where you want to do business. You want to do business outside of LA because it's kind of cool? You do that. You want to do business outside of San Francisco? You do that. You want to do business outside of Atlanta? You do that. You want to go into the more rural areas of Arkansas? Go do that, right? It doesn't matter as long as it fits into these 3 criteria that we have found.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. I think that's awesome. I did want to ask too, though, and it just occurred to me, how did you get started with the legalities, like the legal issues involved? I mean, you can do so much research as an individual, but like when you're actually crafting these contracts and things that, like you mentioned, the line item that allows you to market it and things like that, like how did you retain a lawyer to solve this stuff? Did you figure it out yourself, or how did that part work?
So we have this philosophy, like talk about for example, the contract right now. So yes, so we had lawyers create those contracts, but we gave the lawyers very specific instructions on how to create a contract. And the instructions are driven based on our philosophy behind the scenes. And the philosophy of this land flipping is such that we are truly looking, not even for the motivated sellers, we're truly looking for the people who don't want their land anymore. So if somebody doesn't want their land anymore, and typically so the first few deals, we just used a contract from somebody. We ran to an attorney and they gave us a contract for a few $100 and we used that and it worked. But then we honed in this contract. We realized that the contract we truly needs to be a 1-page, super mega simple contract. So why? Because if imagine the situation, the seller is in New York, the property is in Texas, and the buyer is in Florida, and you are in Los Angeles. Let's just pick this up. So in such a scenario, you send out the letter, you send out the offer to the seller by mail. We don't send it by email, we don't do it on the phone. We send him a written offer by mail. He sits in New York on his kitchen table and looks through this contract. If that contract is a 10-page fine print, legal size contract, he's going to be confused out of his mind and he's never going to sign this thing. So it needs to be a contract that he can sit and without any supervision, without a realtor sitting next to him, actually read and understand. So we told our attorney that to strip everything out of this contract that he constantly can strip. It's not about any contingencies. There's no contingencies in there. The only thing he needs to put in, like the minimum pieces in the contract. What's the minimum pieces in the contract? From my attorney, as he told me, it needs to have the parties. It needs to basically who is buying, who is selling. It needs to have the subject. it needs to have a date by which it's being consumed, and it needs to have basically the signatures. That's it. So I might be missing one piece so to make it a legal contract. So our legal contract, this is the main pieces that's in there. Plus, then we said, like, well, how about if we can back out of this thing? Let's try it. And we tried it, and people signed it. The rest was then trial and error. Like when we said, like, what if we add a provision in there that it allows us to market the property? Because we weren't allowed, we wanted to list them on the MLS, and the MLS asked, are you the owner? So like a brokerless MLS kind of services, they're like, are you the owner? We're like, no. Well, then you can't list it. Are you an agent? It's like, no, I have a real estate license, but I wasn't the listing agent. I was like, no, we're the principals in the transactions. Like, yeah, I can't list it. So we then added the provision in that we can market it. They signed it. Then we went back to the services, and they're like, well, the owner gave you the right to market it. You can list it through us. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. So a lot of that was then just trial and error and seeing what the sellers mind and what the sellers don't mind. And as we found, the sellers don't mind a whole lot because they're the true non-wanters. They're people that have it in their generation for a while, or they passed away and the heirs have it. The heirs don't want to pay property taxes, and they just don't want to have that thing anymore. And they don't care what they sign as long as there's a chance that he can get that burden of property ownership rid of. Now, at the same time, these properties were properties where their dad wanted to move to when they were retiring and built their beautiful retirement home. So these are beautiful properties. They're not junk. They're great properties in great areas, in great subdivisions, in great geographical areas. And the family just has like a Russian mentality. They just don't want it anymore.
So is it worth being a real estate agent just to get access to the MLS or?
No, because the MLS is regional anyway. So unless you do that, unless you're a real MLS, a real estate agent in the market that you operate in, there's really no benefit to it.
So how's the best way to list your property? Just throw it on Zillow, or is there?
We throw it on Zillow, but strangely enough, the two biggest outlets for properties is Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace.
Interesting.
Okay. So we're selling lots of property on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace all day long.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Well, cool. So Jack, here at the end, how can people learn more about you? How can they get involved in your seminars and your teaching? And where can they find your book?
Sure. So they can find out more about our teachings on the land flipping under www.landprofitfun, fun with FUN.com, like having fun. So landprofitfun.com is the way to get to a place where you can watch some videos and participate that way. And then the second way is to get the book. You can go to forevercashbook.net. So it's not .com, it's .net, .net. forevercashbook.net. Those are the two places you can do that. And we also have a Facebook group that is actually, and I have a podcast too called the Forever Cash Podcast. They have a Facebook group called Land Profit Generator, which is the name of our home study course, Land Profit Generator Real Estate Group, where we have a lot of our successful students hang in there and helping each other. And there's literally success stories and people doing their first deals like on an almost daily basis being reported.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much for your time, Jack. I'm glad you were able to get connected and come online today so we could have this conversation. And that's it. Mike, anything else?
No, I think that's it. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
And great. So cool. Well, thanks to everybody who tuned in and listened here on the live stream or on the podcast. Feel free to reach out to Jack via any of the links he shared, and we'll also put them in the show notes. And without anything else, I guess we'll see you next time.